Welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. Hey Stella, welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. How are we doing?
I'm good, thank you very much. It's a nice sunny day here in Spain. Nice sunny night.
Oh, okay. Whereabouts in Spain are you?
I'm in Burgos in northern Spain, a very lovely city.
Oh, nice. I think, so I'm in, and this feels weird to say this, sunny Manchester.
Oh, well, that's unusual.
Yeah, this is it. It's very, very unusual. So I guess at the start of the show, I tend to ask my guests to pick 4 numbers from 1 to 100. So if you could go ahead and just pick 4 random numbers for me, that'd be great.
1.
Yep.
73.
Okay.
21.
Yep.
99.
Perfect. We will come to them later on down the line. So, Stella, I guess, you know, when my guests come on the show, I tend to ask them to kind of summarize and give me the logline of who they are or what their logline is. Can you remember what yours was?
Yes, I thought what I'd say is I'm a curious, creative, practical pragmatist that started my life studying psychology, accidentally fell into IT and programming, so I was a COBOL programmer, and then sort of climbed my way out and joined L&D about 20 years ago, where I found that, you know, that was where I should always have been probably. I'm an author, and I have recently become a brain lady.
Okay, and we are definitely going to touch on that one for sure. So before we get into kind of your book and stuff, because I really do want to get into that as soon as possible, actually. But when you was in school, Stella, and the teacher would come up to you and say, Stella, what is it you want to be when you grow up? What is it you would say back to him?
I think for quite a long time, I actually wanted to be a fashion designer. I used to spend all my time drawing, you know, really gorgeous clothes and people with gorgeous clothes on. So for a long time, that's what I wanted to be. But I never got that far.
Okay. This is good to know. So, I mean, for my guests, for them who might not know who you are, maybe if you could still give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of kind of your career, where you've been, and kind of, you know, how you've got to where you are right now in your career.
So as I say, I mean, I started with a psychology degree. I did a master's in human communication because I was really interested in people and how they worked. At the time I was looking for work, there were lots of jobs going in IT, and I ended up being a COBOL programmer, and I really enjoyed that. It was great, but I eventually kind of started to move more into the support role, internal technical support. And I really enjoyed the translation between sort of the really techie guys who I didn't entirely understand them, but I understood them enough to be able to translate into sort of human for the people in the business who didn't understand anything they were talking about. So that was really good. And then, as I say, I kind of moved into, I got given this hat that was IT support and training manager. And I did not want to do the training part because I'd had lots of really awful IT training, and I just didn't want to do that. Also, most of my family were teachers, and I didn't want to do that either. But started working with somebody who was really inspirational. She kept saying, Stella, this stuff is about psychology. You know, it's made for you. You're right for it. And kind of got into it and just really, really found my feet. Really love the whole world of L&D. I love the fact we help people and we support businesses and we transform things in a really positive way. And I think for me, bringing in the sort of the psychology, I did a scientific psychology degree, so bringing in the neuroscience and the psychology that I had was really important to start being a little bit cynical, perhaps, and critical of some of the models that were out there and some of the ideas that were out there that I kept thinking, that's just not ringing true somehow. So that's kind of become a bit of a passion for me now, is to try and, you know, debunk some myths and try and make sure that what we do is really evidence-based.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. So, you know, I guess a lot of what this podcast is about more getting to know, you know, Stella and where these ideas and, you know, where the book and stuff came from. But I think in order for us to kind of look at the future, we sometimes have to look in the past. And, you know, when we see it in kind of the corporate environment, or whenever we're going for interviews or whatnot, we're always asked to tell us about how good we've been at a job. And one of my arguments is actually we should be asking people to tell us about the failures. That's for me is where we get most of our learnings from. And if I was to ask you a question, Stella, and I guess what's been the biggest failure what you've had? What has ended up being one of your strongest positives? Later on down the line.
Biggest failure.
Yeah.
It was quite soon after I got into training, and I was working with some really, really great people. They're really good, and I was very excited because I really hadn't done any training at all, really, not sort of really. And I was working with this guy. We were running a program together. It was a leadership development program, and I had just learned the two little pieces I needed to know. I knew nothing about the rest of the program. I had just, really religiously learned what I needed to do. It was a very brain-friendly program, so it was very, over to the learners, but I still felt I needed to know everything. And must have been break time on the first day one of a 2-day program. He got a phone call from his wife to say, I'm really sorry, darling, but that baby that's due in a couple of months is arriving right now. So he just had to leave. And I was then left with a group of, leadership people and the senior head of L&D who was watching very carefully. And I just went to pieces. I did not know what to do. And I sort of tried to work my way through some bits of the program that I knew. And it was just absolutely, utterly horrible. Fortunately, the next day, the other person who could run the program turned up, and he just, he took over really. And I learned so much from that, so much about what you need to prepare, but also what I would do now would just be so different. I just wouldn't. You'd still have to think about it, but I'd call a break. I'd go away and think, well, what's the best way to get the learning out of these people? And actually, they can probably do it themselves. All I've got to do is provide an environment for them to learn. So I wouldn't have that responsibility. I've got to do everything. So that's my biggest learning.
And I think I think that's perfect. I think it's really interesting. Kind of, you mentioned, you don't have to be this person who has to make them learn, and you talked about kind of this environment. And I think, we're probably going to touch upon that later in the book as well. But I guess just kind of connecting the dots of the books. Actually, if I was to say to you, Stella, what book would you give to 5 people as a gift? What book would you pick?
The easy one off the top of my head is John Medina's Brain Rules. I think that's a really useful, practical, nicely designed book with lots of really, really interesting science in it. But if you were, so it depends who you're giving the gift to, doesn't it? But there is also, there was a man called Santiago Ramon y Cajal, who was the guy who first sort of discovered that neurons weren't one big connected thing. They were individual cells. And he was an artist. He wanted to be an artist, but he ended up being a doctor and studying brain cells. But he has painted the most exquisite pictures, before we had photography, really, the most exquisite pictures of brain cells and things. And apparently his book is, you can get his book of brain cells. So that could be a really nice gift for somebody who was interested.
Oh, wow. That sounds pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So I mean, it sounds like kind of when we get talking, this neuroscience and the stuff what we're talking about here is something what for me, I think it seems from you kind of, you're really passionate about it. But kind of again, these questions that can be aimed personally and professionally. But just one more of these quick fire round questions. If you can have a billboard and 1 million people is going to come out of a stadium and see this billboard, what message would you put on that billboard?
That's a great question. I will put learn to learn. Learn to learn.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, go for it.
That gives everybody the skills to do it for themselves.
Okay. So yeah, learn to learn. Kind of walk me through that, because I kind of explain that one to me.
Well, everybody gets, everybody has to learn. It's just, it's human nature. We can't not learn, and we are, regularly compelled to learn or need to learn for ourselves all the time. But we're never actually taught to learn. Nobody ever says, look, this is a really good way for learning, and this is how you've kind of experienced it so far, but actually it's not that useful. So there's just lots of organizations for the moment are spending lots of money on, big training programs, on LMSs, on digital technology, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. They're spending squillions. But we're not actually necessarily supporting the learner to use that technology or that content or those materials as well as they could do. So we're still getting, despite the fact there's some amazing technology, there's still a lot of, content heavy stuff, which is just really hard for people to process and take in. So I just think if we teach people to learn effectively, or help them learn to necessarily, give them some, good clues as to how to do it really well, they will learn for themselves, but they can do it more efficiently. And that's going to be important as well in sort of an ongoing changing world. People are going to need to learn and adapt and learn to forget as well.
Learn to forget. That's a great point. So I guess kind of, for me, I wanted to get into this book as soon as possible. So let's just go there, Stella. So yeah, I mean, talk to me about your book. Am I right in saying, and forgive me if I'm wrong, is this a second edition? Am I right in saying that?
I've just finished writing the second edition.
Yeah.
We've just finished the proofing and things like that. So the second edition will come out in August.
Okay.
The first one, probably 3 years old now.
So yeah, I mean, and yeah, with the second edition, don't give anything away which you don't want to give away just yet. But maybe talk to me about your book, because my audience kind of stems far and wide. There's people who've been in the L&D world for a long time now, and there's kind of people who are new to this. And I can remember my experience when I got into L&D, and my journey kind of came in. I was a deliverer, then I went into design, then I went into OD and group, and then I kind of continued into where I am now. But I remember one of the key things when I very first joined was there was so much knowledge and so much ideas and so much to kind of get carried away with, and I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what was valuable, what wasn't valuable. It could be easy for someone to kind of come into this world now and go, "Oh, VR is the new shiny thing." But maybe tell us about kind of your book and your neuroscience. I'm intrigued.
So I think I said at the beginning, I'm a pragmatist and I'm practical. So the book does have lots of, it has all the neuroscience in it that you need as an L&D person. But more importantly, what it does is, for me, it takes some of that theory and says, okay, that's really interesting, because I think it does get people interested. That's really interesting. But what does that actually mean for me if I'm designing, if I'm delivering, if I'm working in organizational development and I'm having to create a sort of a culture where learning is easy, natural, happening? As business, as we kind of move into the the fourth industrial revolution, people are going to have to learn new skills more often, more quickly, and newer skills that we don't even know what they are at the moment. So people are going to have to learn, and I think we as in L&D, we may not be called that in the future, are going to have to help them learn, and understanding what happens in people's heads when they learn is really useful. But understanding the practical things you can do to make it easier for them is for me what's really important. So the book is, it's got the science in it, but it's about, these are practical ideas. Every chapter has practical ideas that you can go away and apply. Some of them you could apply immediately. You could go straight back and do something different. Some of them you'd have to do some preparation and redesign what you were doing.
Okay, so without giving too much away, because I want people to go and buy the book, what three top, and maybe it's 3 top tips for someone who's new into this world. What 3 things, golden nuggets do you think would be vital for someone who's kind of coming new into, and like you mentioned, we might not be in L&D for much longer, but given that's where it is right now, what 3 tips would you give?
So the first one is never do for the learner what they can do for themselves. Always let, if they can read the book, if they can look at the website, if they can read a blog, if they can, pick up the computer and use it, if they can pick up the bricks and build them, let them do it. Don't do it for them. So that's the key one. Always let the learner do it, because it's them that's got to make the changes. You as the expert already know how to do it. There's a really easy one that I think most people seem to really like, which is that if you ask people to guess an answer, even if they guess the answer wrong, so long as they get the answer, either you tell them or they find it in some way, as long as they have guessed it, they are more likely to remember the correct answer when they're given it, and then to remember it for longer. And they think that's because as you guess an answer, you kind of warm up those cortical pathways, so that when you put the answer in, it's kind of already warmed up and ready to be absorbed. So, get people to guess and explain to them that it's good to guess. Explain to them that will help you learn. I'm not being mean. I'm not going to tell you off if you get the answer wrong. All I'm doing is helping you remember it better. What else? And motivate them, or help them feel motivated. Make people feel, curious, safe, and like they can explore and experiment. So that motivation piece, if they're not motivated, they're just not even going to, the rest of it is just wasted, really.
Okay.
So that's 3 things at quite different levels, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's really good advice. I guess I kind of just want to kind of jump in a little bit, actually, and thinking about it. When it kind of comes to this, feeling motivated and motivate them, how vital is it in your eyes about the environment at which they're in and engaging in?
The physical or psychological environment?
Yeah, maybe it's both. Maybe it's both, but maybe kind of, let's go with kind of psychological first, if you like.
So I think the psychological environment is absolutely crucial. So what's going on in people's heads when they arrive, when they start to learn, whether they're arriving to training course, picking up some e-learning, Googling something on the internet, it really doesn't matter. But what's going on in their heads, if they are feeling curious and are interested and want to learn, it'll happen naturally. You almost can't stop it happening. But if they're feeling resistant or worried that, if I learn this thing, maybe I won't be very good at it, or maybe they're worried that, our jobs are all changing and now I've got to learn this new thing, and actually I'm really fearful because, my role's about to change, and, I've done what I've done for years and I really, really don't want that to happen. So any of those sort of fear factors will not support good learning. And learning is about being able to do things better. And if people don't feel that they will be able to do things better, if they've had really, really bad experiences at school, for instance, where they just felt stupid, when they come into work and suddenly, they're asked to go on a course, or they're asked to do some e-learning, and that just immediately gives them that feeling of, but I'm stupid, I can't learn.
Right.
You've got to get over that somehow.
And I guess how do you do that? Because I can remember, you just provoked a really good memory. I say really good. You provoked a strong memory for me when I was young, kind of. So I have dyslexia and dyspraxia, but it didn't get flagged up until I was in university. And I remember when I was in school, I think it was maths, and I remember the teacher was kind of shouting at me. He's like, "How are you not getting this? How are you not getting this?" And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't understand what you're writing on the board. It looks gibberish to me. It makes no sense. And maybe, when we look at kind of our training courses and the things, and we'll use it as in the context of maybe like a classroom, or how can maybe it's managers, maybe it's managers or your facilitators, but how can we prime that environment?
So for me, this is what brain-friendly learning is about. It's about understanding, the different ways of learning that people have, the challenges they might have. And I'm not saying, you have to understand everything about dyslexia, but if you make sure that as you're delivering information or knowledge of some sort, don't just do it through writing something on the board. Have images, allow people to to manipulate things. I can, like you, I'm not dyspraxic, but I can remember, I think I might have problems with numbers sometimes. And I can remember at school trying to do maths, and it didn't mean anything to me. These numbers on the board, they weren't real things. And my dad brought home a whole pile of blocks. He was a teacher, and he brought home a whole pile of blocks, and I could start putting these blocks all together and manipulating them, and suddenly things began to make more sense. So it's about providing different options for people so they can find the way that works for them.
So it's interesting you mentioned kind of blocks there, and there's a big thing now within Lego with serious play and kind of having this play and this curiosity and stuff. But how and do you actually think it's possible that facilitators, given the time restraints and given the fact of and I always use kind of a context of maybe something like a call center where the people come offline answering calls and they have a 5-minute walk from kind of the answering the last call to making it to a training room. How do we kind of stop our people bringing in the last phone call into the kind of this training environment or this learning environment? How have you seen anyone who's done that really well, or kind of what's your take on that?
I mean, part of it is the learner has to take responsibility for themselves. So we were running a training program once, and we always set up so the physical environment, again, is really important because that will give people a signal as they arrive. So if it looks like school, if it's, rows of desks, that's not going to do a great thing. If it's a great big board table, that's really, really poor for people feeling safe. They feel threatened on a board table. Even if it's, a very typical horseshoe of tables and chairs around it, separates people out. So all our programs, we tend to start with people standing up as they come in. We've got an activity for them to do. We kind of introduce them casually to each other. So they're sort of, they're meeting new people, but not in a threatening way. And they've got something to do. So they're not feeling, well, I don't know anybody here. I feel a bit nervous. Or they've come with a friend and therefore they can work with their friend. So either way, they've got choices. But I remember seeing a lady come into one of our training courses, and as she walked in, I thought, oh, we've got something going on here. She was absolutely stony-faced. She was clearly something had happened. And we'd had everybody standing around. They had things to look at on the wall. So that, the environment was interesting. It was distracting. We all sat down, and I saw her just take this massive deep breath. And she kind of breathed in and breathed out. And she became a different person. And she'd taken that responsibility for herself. She'd recognized that she was not in the great state. And she changed her state. So some of it is getting learners to realize they've got to do that. But some of it is creating an environment where they think, oh, this is different. Okay, this isn't, not that it's scary different, but it's, okay, this isn't what I was expecting. And maybe I need to pay a bit more attention. And actually distract them from that last conversation they've just had. Or sometimes you might have to actually acknowledge it and say, I can see that some of you have had a tough day today. Let's get rid of that in some way.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess that kind of that change in context between one to the other. It's I read a book a while back about I think it was called Nudge. And it was kind
of a great book.
Yeah, and they've used a great example of petrol. When the petrol light comes up on your car, it isn't saying it's not say it's alerting you to kind of say you need to fill your tank up. But actually, what it's doing is the light is actually just a change in context from one state to another, and actually that was fundamentally talks about how that light is the element to that. But I guess coming back to this thing of there's always an argument, and I'm sure this won't be new to you, but there's this argument of, classroom training needs to, we need to move more and more away from this, and we need to be more digital and more kind of, e-learning and this and that, and kind of less classroom. What's your take on that? Because, I mean, fundamentally, if you look at, say, and I use e-learning in the context of this click next e-learning from way back when, well, what you still see now, I guess, as well. But
Yep.
it's kind of like, how can we, how can, I guess the question what I'm trying to get round to is kind of how can you remove something like a classroom or an experience when the only other alternative at the moment seems to be this e-learning? What's your take on that?
So I think there's some really good e-learning, there's some really good digital learning, and there's some really rubbish classroom learning. So I don't think it's really about the context. I think it's about how well it's designed and delivered that is probably the most important. And I do really think that digital learning can really, really support learning. So I think one of the really good ways to use digital is to, give people access so they can access it when they need to. It's there. They can, whether it's job aids or whether it's actual information they want to find. I think that's really useful. Um, Clearly, there's lots of apps and things now that people are completely addicted to. They're learning apps, are completely addicted to them, and those are really working as well because if you're addicted to it, you're going to keep using it, and so that they can be really, really good for that sort of thing. I still think we need social learning. I think we're very human. We need social connection, and actually, So I think what we need is a blend. But I have had an experience recently that I'm going to share with you that has made me think about this quite deeply. So we moved to Spain 2 years ago and put all our best things, all our precious things in storage. And over Easter, we were told the storage unit had burned down. So everything we had has gone. That's been really, really difficult, as you might imagine.
Yeah. Wow.
But what's been really, really interesting is the memories I have of those things. So we went back to our house and we went into every room that didn't have our stuff in anymore. We went back into every room and I sat there and I thought, so what was there and what was there and what do we have in that cupboard? And I realized that it was the physical sensations, the sound sensations, the smells of things, the movements you had to do to, I don't put things away or get them out, or all those things were encoded in my body. So I had a particularly strong memory. We had to create an inventory list. And I'm not saying we've got every single thing, but I reckon we've got pretty much most of the things that are in that house. And the reason I'm saying that is I think one of the challenges with digital is you're not going to get that same really multisensory, really strong memory of it. So I just wonder going forward if we are using more and more digital, are we taking something away if we don't allow at least some face-to-face, real world learning?
Yeah, and I think it's actually a great shout. That actually, when I think about some of my, when I very first started out, some of my best experiences being actually someone who's been involved as not actually being a facilitator, but being part of the audience. Kind of actually, when I look at kind of the difference between that, there's a distinct couple of times which have stood out, and fundamentally that's been the people who have thought about that experience and not necessarily thought about it as a classroom, so to speak, but as an experience. In fact, one of the sessions that I went into kind of had candles lit, giving off this kind of sense of, you was walking into something slightly different. It kind of changed the mood.
Yeah, I think the sensory experiences we get from real world learning as opposed to digital virtual world learning that might change, once we get smell around in virtual reality, but I don't think it's going to. I think it would be almost impossible to create real experience.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at kind of the things which are as close to that as possible right now, you've got your VR and your AR, but fundamentally it does only tap into kind of 1, 2, 3 maximum of kind of the things what are going on.
And whilst we sort of tend to think of five senses. There are actually far, far more. So five senses were described. I think it was Plato, or I think it was Plato sort of said there are these five senses. Actually, there's far more senses. So there's, we've got the sense of balance. You've got your sense of hot and cold. You've got your sense of, where are my limbs in relation to the rest of my body? How does my stomach feel? We have so many more senses, sense of time, sense of connection, all those things that are much harder to recreate in a digital world.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my key focus points, probably for the last 3 years, knowing that it was a focus point, has been kind of this experience design. So kind of a lot of which I've been doing now. I've been working with people like Punch Drunk, and kind of looking at true immersive experiences, rather than it being this kind of digital, but actually this more interactive experience. And I think it's interesting. The more we try to, the more things change, the more we tend to stay the same. And I think that we've kind of gone one way originally with digital, and we've kind of thrown everything at it and gone, everything needs to be digital and everything needs to be e-learning. I think actually what you're seeing now is digital's got its place for performance support, job aids, just in time, but we still
and also really useful for reviewing learning.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And because digital is available, it's there all the time. People can access it when they want to. If you've got to wait, it depends how organizations organize their training, but if you've got to wait, even if it's 3 months for a training program, sometimes that happens. That might just be you haven't got enough. So at least you can get yourself warmed up with digital, and then have the face-to-face for that kind of, now I need to practice it. Now I need an experience. Now I need to talk to somebody who perhaps is an expert to get some of my questions answered that I can't get answered digitally.
Yeah, and I think I use this kind of sentence to kind of, when someone says to me, what is experience design? And I think right now, experience design is yet to be defined what it actually is. I think people use it differently in different contexts, but I kind of say experiences open a door to allow change in. And I think fundamentally you need an experience, you need something to kind of, and I'm going to use the word nudge, but you need something to open you up and make, and prime you to be.
Yeah. I think that's part of the motivation to want to learn something new. Whether you have a good or a bad experience, you need something that is what being human is, isn't it? Having an experience and learning from it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's how we evolved to be where we are today.
It's really interesting. I think the more, I think, when we talk about kind of like, you mentioned it actually before, it was kind of like you've seen really bad e-learning and you've seen kind of really good e-learning. But, I think storytelling is a massive aspect which is still struggling on a digital e-learning.
Storytelling's amazing.
But I guess that's another thing when I sit back down and I think about kind of, what is one of these things, what I'm missing, when I think about it, and I'm going to use a really dry subject here, but compliance, for example, compliance and e-learning would be fine for compliance. It's kind of, it's one of these things for the business, what we need to have and stuff. But I do worry about this kind of, everything needs to be digital, and actually, where are we going to be in 10 or 15 years time when people can't really recall that e-learning, what we did?
Yeah. And Danny, compliance learning, every compliance rule has a story behind it. Those rules don't just get invented for, because somebody wants to create compliance rules. Everyone is because somebody had an accident or, was fraudulent or hurt somebody, or, every compliance rule has a really good story, a motivating story as to, why do we need to behave like this? And so for me, there is no such thing as a dry or a boring topic. There's only dry and boring training. And anything can be made. The thing is, everything is interesting. I think it's often the training or something about the way people present this stuff that suddenly it becomes dry, it becomes unemotional. And actually, it is real. And if we embrace, if we look into the stories and share the stories as to why we need that compliance, then people kind of, that A, they'll remember it better, and B, they're at least going to think about it and make a decision at the point where they think, do I, I'm trying to think of a compliance thing, do I pick up the wrong fire extinguisher, or do I, do I shout at this child, whatever it might be. At least if they've got a strong story in their head as to why they're not supposed to do that, that gives them a choice moment. Whereas if it's just do not shout at children, do not, use the green fire extinguisher, it's not memorable.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly that. There's I use this kind of when I'm having conversations. There's a reason why we remember our favourite teacher.
Yes.
So,
yes.
It's really...
And you were talking about experience. We so learn from experience. So I told that story before about that experience where I was, completely unprepared, really, or only prepared for a very small part of the day. And I recently had an experience where I turned up prepared for 8 people to be at the training program. And as I walked into the room, I thought, there's a lot of chairs here for 8 people, aren't there? And this room doesn't look set up as I was expecting. So I got the room rearranged, and then I sort of checked, and I thought, I've got 23 people coming, not 8. So now I have to adapt this program I was running for 23 people. Actually, it worked better because suddenly I had to change, I had to adapt, and I had to let them sort of take the reins more. And it worked out really well.
Yeah, there's something to that kind of that mindset as well, right? Kind of your mindset to that was, actually, this is the cards what I've got now. This second, I've prepped for 8, I've got 23, and actually your mindset to kind of being, and I'm going to insert a buzzword here, but being agile and kind of, a lot of people would have gone, whoa, I'm not doing this, I'm not prepared, I'm not, blah blah blah. But actually, your mindset to that sounds like one of kind of, of a kind of an open and growth kind of mindset where it's like, actually, we can work with this, we can do this.
Well, they were going to be here, weren't they? It wasn't their fault. They were going to be there. So we had to you just have to be creative in that moment. And actually, I'd run this program before with 20 odd people. So I knew how it worked. I knew I could do it with 20 odd people.
That's awesome.
So there's something about experience as well, isn't it? That you learn from all your experiences.
Yeah, and I was having a conversation, it was probably one for season 1, I think, with one of my guests, and saying, there's a reason why you can't just pass your driving test on an e-learning. And there's kind of a reason why your first aid, kind of, the best first aid courses I've ever seen haven't been an e-learning click next.
No.
And there's something around that kind of that feedback and that kind of that engagement and that, peer to peer and kind of community, and I think you miss out a lot of time with digital, definitely, as much as we try to be.
And making mistakes as well. A lot of digital is about how to get it right, but actually it's the making mistakes and then having to deal with the consequences that is genuine learning, isn't it? As long as you deal with them and don't repeat the mistake again.
Yeah, definitely. That if anything, it becomes your most impactful learner, I think.
Often, yeah.
So I kind of want to just jump back in on your book. I mean, there's a couple of quick fire round questions here, Stella. I just want to be mindful of your time. But when it comes to your book, what was the 3 biggest challenges you had when you was writing your book?
I really enjoyed writing the book, and I loved all the planning, and I really enjoyed the writing. For me, the hardest bit is the checking afterwards. So that, the going through and checking that, the proofreading and checking that all the references were all correct. So that was absolutely, for me, the biggest challenge. I'm not sure I had any of the. I really enjoyed doing it. There was a big fear when it first came out was, oh my goodness, I've sort of put myself out in public here. And what if everybody turns around and says, well, that's just a pile of rubbish. What on earth were you talking about? And who do you think you are writing a book? But that wasn't about writing the book. That was about what the reaction might be.
Yeah, and that kind of takes me to this thing of
Fortunately, it wasn't. People liked it.
yes, definitely. Um, it's an interesting one when it comes to kind of writing books. I mean, I've never wrote a book, and I don't think I'll ever come around to kind of writing one. But um, I think there is an element of bravery to that, definitely, and putting your ideas out there, your thoughts, and kind of, and I think it's very courageous to do. Um, Especially in this day and age as well. I think it's so easy for people to kind of boo-hoo your ideas. It's so easy for me to kind of go onto something like a Twitter and go, nah, Stella's book weren't that great.
Please
It's
don't say that.
no, and I wouldn't, but it's so easy to do nowadays, right? It's kind of, so I think kudos to you for doing that, because I think it takes a lot for someone to release a book. I really do.
But then again, you learn from it. So reading, on Amazon, you get reviews and things, don't you? And it's quite nice to go and read the reviews, particularly the good ones. But when I go on Amazon or TripAdvisor, any of these things, I always go and look at the bad ones as well, just for a bit of balance. And somebody really didn't like it, and that was entirely their opinion. That was fine. But he said, it was focused very much on face-to-face training, and then didn't focus on digital. So it had some elements of digital in it. So I thought, well, do you know what? That person was so right. So in this book, there's a whole chapter on digital, and I've managed to weave digital in much more. So again, you can, that's sort of the challenges that people throw at you. They're another learning opportunity.
Yeah, and again, it comes in, and it's a great mindset, that, definitely. And we see this a lot now in this coaching culture around kind of embracing this kind of this mindset, and we can talk about resilience and whatnot, but
well, I guess it's the growth mindset, isn't it, really?
yeah, 100%. So I mean, these questions are kind of you can take these personally, professionally, but it's more about kind of how getting to know Stella. So can you remember the first time you ever got in trouble?
I have to say I was quite a good girl.
Okay.
The first time I got in trouble. No, I can't. I don't remember the bad things.
That's fine. That is perfectly fine.
I'm sure I got into trouble a lot for doing all sorts of things when I was a child.
So I guess when it comes to kind of when we look at kind of this social media and this kind of Twitter and Facebook and stuff, who's the 3 people you would recommend everybody should follow? And let's keep it let's keep it L&D wise.
Okay. I think Jo Cook from Lightbulb Moments is a really good person to follow. She shares a lot. She's very generous in what she shares. So I think she's really good. Gosh, I follow quite a lot of people, so that's quite a tricky one. Stumped me, because I've got so many people, and if I say one, I'm going to upset somebody, aren't I?
It's always a tricky one, right? Kind of
Donald Taylor is great to follow. Again, he shares a lot of stuff, but he's also very human on Twitter, so I like his humanity.
Okay. Okay.
What do I really like? I'll have to come back to you on that one, I think, because otherwise I'm just going to upset somebody. Or
okay, well, maybe we've got 2 L&D folk. Maybe it's just one person who you think everybody should follow. Who else? Maybe it's not professional. Maybe it's just personal. Like, who else do you follow? Who do you really like the tweets of?
I actually, this is really ridiculous, but I actually follow my daughter because she works in cybersecurity, and she posts some really interesting stuff about cybersecurity.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting.
And then her name's Alice Collins, if you need a Twitter handle to follow.
Yep, I will definitely put them in the show notes.
So for me, that's really interesting, because it's a whole world it's a new world out there that's really, really interesting in terms of the digital, but also in terms of learning. So yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Okay, well, Stella, I just want to be mindful of your time, but I guess where can people find out a little bit more about kind of the happenings of Stella and the world, what you're doing, and all the stuff what you're up to. And where can we find your book as well?
Okay, so the book's called Neuroscience for Learning and Development, and you can find it on Kogan page with the publishers or on Amazon. We have a website, so it's called www.stellarlearning.co.uk, and we tend to post things on there, events and whatever's going on, blogs. We were blogging regularly. I am on Twitter myself, so that's at Stella Collins. And I'm using LinkedIn a lot more at the moment for some reason. That seems to be, I don't know, maybe just keeps coming into my inbox, so I notice it. And then I've also, I think I mentioned that I've just become a brain lady. So there are 4 of us. One lives in the States, one's in Holland, one's in Belgium, and I'm in Spain, but from England. And we've all got this real passion for practical application of neuroscience and psychology to improving performance at work, so to real life world work challenges. And we called ourselves the Brain Ladies, and we're brainladies.com.
Okay, awesome. I will put all them in the show notes. I guess I've got 2 more questions and then we are done. Okay, so question 1, right at the very beginning, I kind of asked you, what is it when the teacher asked you kind of, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you mentioned kind of this, I think you talked about kind of fashion and stuff.
Fashion designer.
Yeah. So obviously, Stella, you of all people know we never stop growing. We never ever stop. So if I was to ask you now, Stella, what is it you want to be when you grow up? What would you say?
I would now like to be a children's author and illustrator.
Okay, perfect.
Children's books.
Okay, that's interesting. Definitely.
That's my retirement job, if I ever retire.
There's too much work to be done, Stella. There's too much work to be done. So I guess a little bit of fun. So I asked you for a couple. I asked for some numbers, and I think you picked 4. So your numbers tally up to a random list of items on my iPad, and your items are a spoon, a canvas, a tire swing, and an iPad charger. And the idea is you're on a desert island. What are you doing with these 4 items, Stella?
Ooh. I'm going to use the tire swing to in some way catch some dinner. Oh, no, I know what I'll do. I'll fill it with soil and I'll grow some plants in it. That'll be really good. The iPad charger, I could potentially use that. I don't have an iPad, so does that have a long wire on it?
Longish.
Yeah. So I could maybe use that for catching fish in some way. And I'm going to use the spoon and the canvas. I'm going to get some like coloured soil and things, and I'm going to use the spoon to act like a sort of paintbrushy type tool and paint on the canvas.
Awesome. Stella, it's been an absolute pleasure.
And relax.
Yes, it's always an interesting one with that question, because I get to see people's creativity and kind of a lot of people trying to want to disappear from the island, and a lot of people just say, you know what, I'm here, it's cool, let's make the most out of it. But yeah, so Stella, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming onto the show.
Thank you for some really interesting questions. It's been really lovely to talk to you, Danny.
No worries. Enjoy your evening, Stella. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.